So our idea with this roundtable discussion today is to invite some of the most renowned experts of BIM from all around the world that I met throughout my career. We have representatives visiting us from so many different countries. You see 6 countries listed here. And the reason why they're here today is to share their experiences with us. With that, I pass the microphone to my great friend Balázs Révai, who's going to talk about the largest projects built in Hungary today.
Thanks, Miklós. I work for a group of companies, employed 200 engineers, nearly. We started to participate in construction industry more than 30 years ago. We have a lot of German works, so we have to do our methods according to German and nowadays the British standards. The most important thing about every project is to start it properly. Suffering from lack of preparing is the most common issue. On the other hand, not all the participants work with the model, but they should be our demand group. It should be known the aim before the modeling starts, so demand describes what to do and prepare describes how to do. It's a hard work at the beginning. We have to do a model besides the plans. This model is a standalone design documentation. Participants should be able not just read, but work with them. Here we did suggest this one, the first. Structural engineer made the next model. We put back to our models. And fabrication preparation made the latest one and put back also to the model. Tracking service is included in our contract. We do some 360 panoramas when walking along the building. We did some on-site scanning. The point clouds are put back into the model to check implementing issues with special regard to MEP systems. The result was an as-built model to feed facility management softwares. How can we see it at the authoring environment? The BIM model merged with the point cloud. Most exciting building what I work on, the Hungarian Music Center, House of the Hungarian Music.
So being able to access the BIM model, so it's very important to share the model, have a central environment, preferably in the cloud or in a server, for all participants to access with fixed access rights or very finely definable access rights, allowing them only to do the interactions and adding data that's within their realm and within their responsibility. And it's also very important to be able to backcheck and trace which decisions were made by who and when for obvious liability reasons. So thank you very much, Balázs, for sharing your thoughts. And please pass the microphone over to our next guest, Chandra, who will continue the session with his thoughts.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to Miklós and Bricsys for having me here. So I just wanted to keep it very simple, as Miklós gave me only 5 minutes. So I didn't realize we will have more time, but it looks like this. Just to give you a brief of where I started and what I'm doing now. So I'm an architect from India with around 18 years of experience. I have worked in many different countries, like you can see it from there. But with BIM, what happened was we tried to implement BIM on one of the projects in 2007-8, and it was a 100+ story tower in Dubai. And we had no clue of what BIM was, and at that time it was Revit. So we started implementing it, and we failed miserably, obviously. And then we dropped it. We fell back to CAD, and we finished the project. It's still constructed, And then I came back to Chennai, my hometown, and I joined a construction company where they were using Revit for all the 3 flavors, like all the 3 disciplines. And at that time, it was a separate product for each discipline. So we used that, and we created good for construction drawings, and that was my first entry to use BIM. For me, BIM should be something like which makes your workflow smarter and keeps your workload lesser. But in practice, it doesn't happen like that yet. And then what happened was I moved to Singapore. I was with ADAS there. We were still on Revit and doing a large mixed-use development projects, and also offices and all sorts of large projects in ADAS, basically. That's where I met Fred. And after that, I moved to ArchiCAD. Basically, we tried to implement ArchiCAD within ADAS, and I got in touch with Graphisoft. So I slowly moved to Graphisoft, and instead of helping 5 people in one company, I was helping maybe 50 people in 10 companies. So that was how I started into BIM implementation full time. And then I had to move to Sydney because I was looking to settle down somewhere. And now I'm back to architecture company as such, not a software company anymore. And I'm back to Revit as well. And now I'm working on transport sector. So we are working on large stations. These are like infrastructure projects which demand a lot of equipment because they are all driven by engineering. So the requirements of BIM is pretty high. And the current projects that I'm working on, are all like LOD 500 and 600 ready for FM is what we are supposed to deliver. So just to give you, like I said, I wanted to keep it simple. So that was the tower where we tried to implement BIM. That was the first project. And the second image is the office headquarters for Unilever in Jakarta. And the third one is the hotel in Chandigarh. The below one, which Miklos used for my intro, is one from ADAS, not the latest one though. And the last one is the station one. So this is the kind of projects that we are doing now, where you have a station which is underground, and then you have a tower which is on top, which is an overstation development, what we call as an OST. And the next project that I am with the same company has 2 OSTs, just to make it complex, nothing else. So this is the kind of projects that we are doing. So day by day with BIM, whether or not the software is supporting, the projects are getting complicated. What are the issues with the current BIM workflows? So we are supposed to work collaboratively, but we are working in separated models. Now the reason why the models are separated are the first set of 4 points which I have listed down. Obviously, performance-related slowdown, complicated geometry everywhere, and there are a huge list of companies involved in the project. So there is a work breakdown structure. The models have to be broken down based on the scope of work. And then sometimes, like in the current projects, we do have file size restrictions. Like your model is supposed to be 250 to 400 MB. Weird, but it is true. And the main issue is documentation time is still extra. So when we split the models, the cross-referencing goes for a toss. And then the attributes management is crazy. None of the software currently can manage attributes from a common file. And you will have issues when you are tagging in the other file. The model is in one place, and it goes on. The list goes on. Other question which came to my mind was, is BIM really working as a process, or is it just a tool? So again, I think Fred will elaborate more. So the issue is, if you are using the best tool for the best task, or for the task at hand, what is the interoperability? Is that actually getting converted from one tool to another? Most probably the answer is no, but that's what is happening. And we also need to have an LOD matrix, which I might have an object which is fully detailed at the end of one project, but I'll still have to start the project from scratch the next time. Is that the workflow that we want? I don't know. These are the questions that I would like to discuss. Ideal workflow, obviously the tool should aid me and make my job lesser. Intelligent associative relationships, I saw some examples. I'm really happy to see them from Bricsys. And I think one of the questions which I have is already answered. Classification and how an element is modeled, can they be separated? Looks like it can be. So that's way to go. And can editing history be made more transparent? This is again stems from the fact that we need to have accountability at every stage. Then documentation to be a true byproduct of modeling. You should not be sitting and documenting it again if you are concentrating on the model. Again, I'm seeing a lot of AI-based solutions from Bricsys, and I hope they will address really all these issues so that more time is spent on design. I was surprised to see some of the similar points from the presentations of yesterday. So I think everyone is facing the same problem. So once again, thank you so much for having me.
Hi everyone, I'm going to try to do it as quickly as possible. My name is d.o.o from the firma Archipel Generalplanung in Switzerland. A little bit about myself. I work as an architect and as a BIM manager at this firm. I studied and lived in Lisbon most of my life. I moved to Bern, Switzerland for about 7 years, where I had the chance to really develop work upon my BIM skills. I'm also a member of the Building Smart Swiss chapter, and where I lead the IFC and Open BIM workflows working group, and my experience is mostly on hotel, wellness, and health facilities. A little bit of housing for fun, but not much. About our firm, we are a general planner. I don't know how to translate it exactly in English. We have our offices in Zurich and in Bern. We focus on project management, quality assurance. We design, coordinate. We have external and internal teams. We cover the whole scope of deliverables that you can have on a project. And we have BIM and visual design and construction as a core competence. It's a must. Also, when it's not ordered from the project owner, we just do it exactly like that. And we also have a background from people that worked on BIM consultancy firms and product management firms. So we have a different point of view there. I bring you two examples of the projects we're working on now. One is the big one in Bern, the main hospital. The numbers are quite impressive. But it is like that. We have a huge amount of data. I met Miklos exactly because of performance problems with this model. It's huge. We do it all open BIM. We only focus on the output of IFC models and some drawings for those who still need it. We have a lot of models. The BIM management is made in-house, and I do it with a team, of course. No one does it alone. Then we are now working on a smaller project, but a little differently. It's also a hospital. It's quite smaller, but we are working more on a database-centric approach, where we try to model. We call it like model by data, where we use Grasshopper. We don't lay out. We don't do generative design, but we pull the data from the database with Grasshopper, and we generate the spaces, furniture, and all that we can optimize. It's about small steps and small optimizations, and not all at the same time. It doesn't work. I cannot advise trying to do it all at one time. The bad inconsistent models. That's the problem. That's why I'm here to see what Bricsys can. It looks good. Looks promising for what IFC goes. Like I heard, it's integrated. It's at the base of Bricsys, and I was very glad to hear it. Over detailed models are of no interest in a data-centric project method. And then the other side, the bad tendering, the project owners who get some BIM experts who it's just easier to do an all-inclusive order and say we want all this data, and no one can deliver it. That you have to work with your project owner to get a realistic output. Ideal BIM workflow doesn't exist, but there are criteria. It has to be fully integrated, that all the way to the contracting and production when possible. Open, internationally standardized, of course, at the same time flexible, and it does not work if it's not a teamwork. There's some from country to country. There are different cultures that they just send the lawyers to meetings. It doesn't work. You have to send the lawyers with the people that are going to do it, because otherwise it doesn't want to work, and they end up in court at the end with costs. The life cycle of the project must be in your mind the whole time. These four main aspects are what you expect in a normal life cycle, but the small parts, the connection to all these other types of information and people are what must be at the center of this integrated approach. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Frederico Ramos, but you can call me Fred. I'm the head of architecture of ArcIDC. I'm an architect by training with a second degree in master planning and environmental issues, and I've worked in such different places as Western Europe, Hong Kong, Singapore, Macau, and Australia. Why am I here? Well, although I'm an architect, I'm a very enthusiast of BIM since the beginning, and AEC digitalization. I'm often invited to do some talks on BIM, and I had the honor of leading some teams actually getting us several awards in terms of BIM and AEC technology. So what do we do at HARC? So at HARC we focus on developing all the vertical of healthcare facilities. So we start on investment advisory, planning design, that's including of course architectural, medical planning, interior designing, engineering. We like to say that we have 99.9 whatever is needed to do an hospital in-house, because there are some things that are so specific that actually is more effectively to reach out for a specialist than actually doing it ourselves, because it doesn't compensate to have one person in one office to do one project every 10 years. We need to have the best people working with us, and you'll not get the best at anything if you just do it once in 10 years. So 20 languages, 5 countries, 10 nationalities, but it's only one team. So being an architect, of course, when someone asks me, oh, can you actually put some ideas about the challenges and way forward, or what are the problems of BIM? We always like to come up with different approach, so I came up with this idea. So challenge and way forward. So one of the things that I don't like actually in BIM is this idea that BIM and design are two different things. You might be familiar with this hard-cut approach that historically was very common in the industry. Then it moved to this idea of fade in, fade out, that became very famous also, developed by Jacobs from Barkinger's group, back when we was the BIM manager at Barkinger's group. I personally see it as slightly different, and for me it's all about data. BIM just manage data. It happens to be, could be geometry data, or could be actually information data. And I see it as a pool of data that is going to be augmented as you move through the project. So it's completely integrated between one and the other. So I think one of the most challenging aspects that we have in the industry in terms of BIM is actually to ensure data preservation. So how do we move actually to a common data environment where BIM is the single source of truth, addressing issues such as data integrity, standard robustness, and data interoperability. One of the things that I really find challenging is this aspect that how you move through process and how you actually always losing data constantly. Traditionally, in all the processes that I have entered in data, this kind of tends to happen. Also, and this is just a little bit provocative, I think the problem of BIM is BIM itself. People see it as a BIM information model. I actually think we should move away from that and we should focus on VDC, and I even like it to say VDC plus O, that is Virtual Design, Construction and Operation. There is a mindset that needs to change in the industry where we don't see the BIM as the object, final object and objective. We actually see it as it is a digital twin from reality that could be fed with data from reality to IoT sensors that allow us to do simulations before you actually implement it. So it's an opportunity for us to do less mistakes, and we are actually building and operating something virtually. And that's the change that we want to make. So just to conclude, if I'm allowed, thank you very much. Being an architect, I actually thought might be interesting if we look to the future. So just as a challenge for us to reflect. Probably, with all these changes that we have been seeing and the development of technology, what if we are facing a new paradigm? A new paradigm where actually it will require a new type of architects that actually operate in a new process. We no longer design buildings, we design the systems that will be designing the buildings. Yesterday we saw some amazing things in terms of AI. We will have new roles. So our expertise are actually going to be used to manage the requirements that systems need to operate in terms of the design. In the complete new industry, and we saw even today, adopting mass production of limited series, focus on fabrication, and for the users, by the users. We experts always like to say, we are the experts, this is very complicated. But there is actually, I think it's the opposite. We should be moving towards democratization of the design process. And I like to actually quote this example for UN Habitat, where populations actually were engaged in the development of the discussions about their future communities' designs by using such a simple tool as Minecraft. BIM doesn't need to be overcomplicated. We don't need to waste 10 years to become proficiency in a software. It's not about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, hi, my name is Mats. I'm maybe the only Swedish guy here. It's really weird, this conference. And I will also take the role as a typical Swedish boring guy. I will give you a kind of insight to my everyday work. I don't bring out the one-off fancy projects. So this is me, civil engineer from the beginning, rock mechanics, lots of Led Zeppelin stuff and such, but rock and soil mechanics, but I've never worked with that, not even 1 second. This is our company, Lillywell Architects. We're 240 people strong, and we make many projects, hundreds of projects every year, and of course then not those super big projects. These are our different areas where we work. Started working with BIM in 2002. And I started a little bit before, in 2099, around that. So we're quite seasoned with working with 3D CAD. Actually, pretty often it's 3D CAD. It's not BIM all the time. But anyway, this is also our kind of specialties, and I'm to the top left, BIM plus D plus, weird stuff. But we put the BIM parts of our organization and also digital development there. So we do a lot of regular stuff, and we also do some fancy stuff. People talk about Grasshopper. We use it for analysis, not for design, because we have our CAD program kind of caters for our design needs. But we do some of this. Also really important now, when we produce lots of data all the time, we need to visualize the data so people actually can understand it, because otherwise data is useless. So this is kind of interesting. And it's also very hyped right now. And this is boring me, coming with a normal distribution curve. And this is everything I work for, because we're a big company and we have many people, and architects, senior architects to young engineers, young architects fresh from school. Everyone works working in the same model, so it needs to work for everyone. And this is also our design. We need to have a solid business, so our design is not super fancy. It's also nicely stuck in the middle there. Personally, I would like to be to the right part of the diagram, but yeah, not when I'm working. Work highlights. Yeah, this is a highlight. This is Excel. This is what I'm working with right now. So we're actually, this is for the procurement. So I have a hospital. It's one of our bread and butter projects. These are interior things, furniture that have codes and stuff that we get, and we use Excel for adding data into the main model. And here we just filter the Excel to make this is a pivot table. So it's really nice to work with the data. So this is the hospital, and this is a screenshot from my screen last week. And then if I take away the walls, and then you see here, lots of furniture. So it's quite a lot of things to kind of work with. And the BIM issues, like I said before, it's BIM actually, or the ignorance what BIM is. I don't believe in big one BIM. You can have uninterrupted workflows smaller, or well, it depends on the project. And but BIM is very misused. We often get forced to use a BIM software because the owner says so, because the owner asked their CAD reseller what kind of software we should use. So that's what I'm working with also. On the smaller scale in my program, or in the program we use right now, we don't have any central management. So it's project-based, so it's a little bit cumbersome. And also we lack automation, seriously. And the ideal process today, I couldn't come up with anything better than, I prefer best-of-breed solutions, so you can grab new tools that suits your business the best, and it will be made possible through OpenBIM workflow. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, man.
Hi, hello everyone. I'd like to say thanks for inviting me here. I'm very enthusiastic about BIM, and I'd love to talk about it. So this is a great opportunity. My name is Peter. I'm originally from Hungary. I'm currently living in USA. A bit about myself. I've been working for one of the major BIM software vendors for 6 years. You can read it. For 1 year in Budapest and for 5 years in Hong Kong. One of the highlights of my time there is helping to facilitate a development partnership with one of the major construction firms to localize the building performance engine to the local Hong Kong BIM Plus standards, and also to integrate BIM with the firm's existing digital twin solution for asset management, with linking desktop and mobile and geo tagging and GIS, all of that together. So that was a really big milestone. I've also been focusing on BIM consulting. I've held a lot of workshops for universities, for National University of Singapore, Polytechnic in Hong Kong, Hong Kong University, Chinese University of Hong Kong. This picture is from Taiwan, from the Fengtia University. We're doing a BIM workshop for the architecture students. I've also been leading the BIM implementation for 2 really large architecture firms. Both of them have more than 500 architects. And I've helped to develop the first first guide for a fully BIM-based workflow in Hong Kong for the general building plan submission, which was the first of its kind. And that is the process in Hong Kong, which is you need to go through for getting a building permit. So I'm currently based in New York City. I'm working for Leroy Street Studio. And as you see, it's not just Leroy Street Studio. We're about 60 people. Most of them are architects. And this group consists of 3 different companies. The second one, BLDG, started in 2008. It's a construction management company inspired by the interest in building and collaborating with subcontractors. And we also have LSS Interiors. We're focusing on mostly high-end residential. This project called the Shore House has received numerous awards. It's located in North Haven, New York, which is it's on Long Island. It's a nice area next to New York City on the Atlantic Ocean. Lots of beach properties. So as you can see on these images, we designed the architecture and the interior, and we also manage the construction to take full control of the process. We serve as a one point of service with the customer. And these houses are some of them go for more than $100 million. And these are residential, so these are single family homes. They're really high end, really high quality. As you can see, we have challenges with the modeling here. We don't use standard BIM objects. We have to model everything, and that is one of the challenges they're facing. And besides these three companies, there's also Hester Street Collaborative, which is a voluntary group to provide design services for those neighborhoods that are underserved and they don't have access to design services. So it's a non-profit organization to help the communities in New York City, which are less fortunate. And as I said, we also are interested in the craft of building. So we don't just do fancy designs, we also think about how to build it. We have people with construction background in our company. So using the trendy terms, we would say design and manufacturing all in one. I see some laptops on the desk. I'm sure you know what kind of quality you can achieve when design and manufacturing and all of that hardware, software all goes together and controlled in one hand. We believe this gives us a better control, and we are eager to take this higher level of responsibility to achieve the very high quality design that we deliver to our clients. And the two bottlenecks that I see in the current BIM workflows, one is I see a lot of constraints in the modeling workflow. As you see, there are, it's an example from one of the BIM tools. You have different types of very specific tools, and that gives you a lot of limitation. And in our daily practice, my colleagues often ask me, how do I model this? Can I use the railing tool? And often these are the same things, and they don't understand why do we need to use a certain tool for a geometry they need to do. So I think that's one of the bottlenecks. And the other one is interoperability. I still don't think BIM has actually delivered the promise of a shared workflow, of an information shared between people. And I think the problem with that is somewhat technical and somewhat commercial. I still don't see the solution. I hope we can find a solution to that, how companies can be interested in really developing interoperable solutions. Like in my previous slide, you wouldn't accept a file made in Pages and open in Word, and if you cannot edit it, you wouldn't accept it. Why is that? Or in Photoshop, why is that these files we have a higher standard, and why that we have BIM tools which are just somewhat working together, and each company has a different strategy on whether they want to keep it closed or kind of opened, but not really. So I hope there will be some innovation. If I would know the solution, I would start a company. So I'm hoping you guys can figure this out. And the modeling is, I think, the biggest constraint, especially for the kind of work we do. I just would like to model everything freely and then decide what I want to do with it. Is it a column? Is it a beam? That's just an element that connects 2 points in space. And then I will decide if I use it a beam. We could have structures that are curved and go from beams to column. It's a transition. Shouldn't be limited by these constraints. And I also think that the way 2D is created from 3D could be more uniform. It's basically, you just cut it and that's the drawing. There are so many types of drawings in the current BIM platforms. Both of the major BIM platforms have quite a sophisticated system, and I think that should be just a uniform system. And if we have this kind of geometry, I think it's much easier to deconstruct the data and reconstruct it, and I think that would help the interoperability issue as well. So in an ideal workflow, I think we would be able to quickly translate data from deconstruct it, and then another plugin or some software can reconstruct it again. And then we could compile all these models in one platform, and then work, and then we could truly work together. That's all. Thank you.
We're not the customer yet, Bricsys, but we do have an open approach. We are glad to hear from all firms that want to do it better. We believe in open standards, we believe in open formats, we enforce it also because it gives us all flexibility. So in that matter, just call us, it's no problem.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting us. Of course, and I was talking with Robert before, actually. A lot of things that you are showing are potentially very interesting. I feel that I personally need to understand a little bit more about it. I do have one thing that concerns me, is the fact that, because it's so easy, the transition from so-called CAD to BIM with Bricsys, you stay within the same environment, so that's a good thing. The problem is, how do you build up a case for those companies that invested 7 years or 10 years ago to actually go to one of the other vendors and then are working already with a different format that now they need to throw away to go back to Bricsys and d.o.o. So it gets us back to this interoperability issue. And back when we were in Singapore, and we also met Peter when he was in Hong Kong, people always talk interoperability and say, oh, all that is very beautiful. Interoperability is when I will be able to open and say whatever format I want. And if you are able to deliver that, I'm sure that with all the other stuff that you already have, then it will work. It's this idea that I presented, that it's data, and every user should be allowed to touch that data, augment it, manipulate it with whatever tool he feels more comfortable with it, and he thinks that it's best to actually improve his project in that sense. It should not be about the software. It should be about the users. And I see that a lot in Brics. I like that. Usually I say, we are the ones that look at softwares and how can we break it and bend it to do whatever we want, not for us to actually be surviving the software itself. So I leave it with it's a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Just one. First, if you want to succeed, it's kind of, at least here in this market, it's political. Because no matter if you fantastic software I've seen you, I'm quite impressed actually. I'm not very easily impressed, but I'm impressed of the tech behind the 3D parts. But no matter, I mean, it's not interesting if we're not allowed to use this software because we have to use a proprietary solution. And on the other hand, also with other fancy tech stuff, if you want architects to use it, it's an interface issue with the program. You need an interface because why is the iPhone popular and not the Ericsson P990? If someone remembers that old asshole mobile phones. So it's really super important. But it's also different countries. Here in my company, we want to have a democratic process. Everyone should work in the model. In other countries, they have lots of armies of CAD technicians, so they don't mind. They use whatever.
Can I just add 2 thoughts? One is I really like the generic approach to modeling that I've seen in the demos. I think that's a very interesting direction, very fresh and different from the status quo, and looking forward to more disruption. I didn't really see how that translates to 2D drawings, and in our practice, we are not the typical BIM practice. We don't do a lot of calculation. I would say we do 3D integrated design and drawing. We still have to have beautiful drawings, and that's one thing that I didn't find an answer. And the other thing that I suggest, what I think would be important is to be able to work together with all the other BIM tools out on the market. I'm not saying IFC is the solution. I don't honestly believe if that's the solution. I leave it up to you. It's an open question. Could be API, could be different plugins. One of my vision is this kind of simplified modeling. This could be easier, I think, to translate that kind of geometry accurately between platforms, as opposed to the current very complicated railing tool in one platform and a stair assembly in another platform. Those are really complex elements, impossible to translate them. But when you have elements that are linear, surface-based, nerves-based, so that I think would help the interoperability. And if you can work together, we can edit these files like I can edit a pages file in Word. If we can work like that, I think that would be great. And yeah.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, our time is up. Thank you very much for... Oh, sorry. One more question? Chandra, I'm so sorry. Chandra, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to add something which I saw from the presentations yesterday. Looks like the Bricsys format is like having many files and only one person can work on one file at a time. This, I believe, is very restrictive. Like I'm just seeing, I haven't experienced it firsthand, but why I feel it's a big problem is every single project, every single company will put 5 different people at the end of the deadline. And at that time, you don't want to change your work breakdown structure. So if you guys can do something about it, like a big container format or whatever, that would be useful. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the experts, please.